Extinction Rebellion Tampa Bay, and thank you for joining us today as we stand up for the one Earth that we have left.
So we're down here today in Tampa at the convention center. They evidently the asshats that are running Florida decided to go ahead and vote and pass this expansion for the toll roads and stuff. And now they're having meetings to discuss it with the public after they pass it. So that's what we're doing down here, folks.
Will all be jeopardized by these road projects. Managing growth, conserving our natural resources, and safeguarding our water supply is a moral imperative. And failure to adequately perform these challenges will have irreparable consequences. Roads are part of our state's critical infrastructure, particularly in view of our miserable commitment to mass transit. However, before we begin spending billions of dollars, we need to examine the need and balance this need against the impact on the environment. Speak to anyone that regularly travels US 19 between Spring Hill and the Georgia border. You will be told that 19 is more than adequate to satisfy both the consumer and commercial need for travel up the Gulf Coast of Florida. You can travel between US 19, between Dixie and Taylor counties, and sometimes only see a couple of cars. Other parts of US 19 are more heavily traveled, but still adequate for the state's needs. North Florida is full of thousands of acres of unspoiled land, home to bears, bobcats, owls, eagles, traveled by panthers, full of swamps and springs and lakes. Our waterways are complex. Many starting in Georgia and flowing into Mexico. Our rivers are spawning grounds for the ancient sturgeon, homes to manatee and scallops. The water that originates in this part of Florida is responsible for satisfying the water needs of much of the Tampa Bay area. In 2011, our state legislators dismantled the state's growth management program, making this issue the responsibility of every concerned citizen of this state. A few years ago, a handful of billionaires and billionaires began acquiring enormous tracts of land in North Florida. Is it a coincidence that these toll roads are tentatively planned through these newly acquired purchases? Do we need to build roads that are not needed and at the expense of our resources to ensure a handful of very wealthy individuals get a substantial return on their investments? If we still had adequate growth management programs in place, I'm convinced we have a check and balance.
Be back on in a little while, folks.
that toll roads are unsustainable and unmanageable long term. Florida is especially vulnerable. It sits on limestone and bedrock, which means that Florida water is affected by major land disturbances. How will a toll road help mitigate damage to this state from the effects of the climate crisis? The sinkholes, rising sea levels, saltwater intrusion, the increased storms and hurricanes. Invest in our future, not in our destruction. Invest in equitable and accessible public transit. A Harvard study links shorter commutes to being free from poverty, being a bigger factor than local schools and crime. Public transit systems give more access to work, education, healthcare, and food. And in this country, our public transit has a D- rating. We must do better. Rather than separate Floridians by making mobility more private and more expensive, unite us with green public transportation that we can all use. Because what do we want?
In Tampa Bay. Catch us on Facebook.
They're getting a little traffic jam going. Block the roads. You're blocking the road too!
Florida State statue, please leave the roadway. You have been warned. Final warning.
When do we want it? Now!
Leave the roadway. You're in violation of Florida State statute. You have been warned.
Indigenous sovereignty! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Indigenous sovereignty! When do we want it? Now! And if we don't get it, shut it down! And if we don't get it, and if we don't get it, shut it down! And if we don't get it, shut it down!
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Toll road to nowhere! Toll road to nowhere!
Sorry about that.
Toll road to nowhere! Toll road to nowhere! Toll road to nowhere!
Thank you for being reasonable, man. Thank you for being reasonable.
Yes, yep.
Okay? I mean,
Toll road to nowhere! Toll road to nowhere!
Thank you very much.